Welcome to Carly's Colorful Corner, where you will learn how to shade a riveting rabbit using pen and ink. First, let's get started with our darkest dark so we kind of have an idea of how far we can go with our ink values or our ink shadows. Let's start with the eyes themselves and start filling in the areas that are not your highlight circles. This will give you an idea of a range of how dark can you go with your ink pen. For this area of your piece, you are going to want to have a lot of pressure in your hand when putting down your ink onto the paper. You're also going to want to make sure that there are not as many white spaces between your lines. The goal here is to not have the white peep through because this is your blackest black on your paper. After you finish your eyes, you're going to want to take into consideration where other darkest darks are going to appear. Usually the underside of animals or when folds start coming together within clothes, so on and so forth, or even areas that are furthest away from the light source. So watch as I start clocking in or blocking in, rather, these darker areas or these darker values to help make the body of my rabbit pop. For areas like the cheeks or the edges of the ear, you're going to want to feather these in using a light hand. Kind of let your pen tip brush or glide against the surface of your paper like butterfly kisses. When doing the nose, make sure that the top of the nose is actually a little bit lighter than the bottom half of the nose. Uh, this lighter plane that is going to be located on the top of the nose, you're going to want some of that white to peep through. So space out your lines just a little bit. However, the underside of the nose is furthest away from the light source and it curves down and under that top plane, so it is going to be darker. So put your lines closer together. To prevent a sense of flatness and to stress a sense of realism, we are going to go around these ears using a varied amount of length. We are not going to strictly outline these ears. We're actually going to feather stroke texture into the ears themselves. This is going to imitate how fur actually works, and it's going to make your piece look more realistic and less cartoony. Working from the bottom of the hip up at a side diagonal slant, we're going to start putting in our hatch shading technique. That is literally a series of diagonal lines slanted in one direction. We are going to try to keep our lines closer together as the shape of the shadow is closer to the underside of the rabbit. The further you go into the body, you can start spacing those lines out, kind of lightening your pressure a bit. This is going to emphasize the gradual shift from light to dark on your rabbit's hip. Let's avoid overworking this area by giving our eyes a break, and let's move on to the underside of the arm on the rabbit, adding in some shadow there, kind of imitating what we have done with the hip, and also add some texture around the hip or the front of the rabbit's leg using varied feathered line strokes for your fur. Now keep in mind anywhere that's underneath an animal's limb or body part, it's going to be a little bit darker because the body of the animal is casting a shadow upon that area. You're also going to want to keep in mind that if two body parts are coming together, like your hip and your elbow, you are also going to get a little bit of a shadow there because there is going to be a blockage of light. So intensify those areas just slightly with your pen. You don't need to press too hard when doing this. An extra layer of ink will do the trick. This is one of my favorite parts because it kind of gives the viewer an illusion that your drawing is three-dimensional by using directional line. It's a really simple, easy trick. Think about how the muscle wraps around the bone of an animal or a person's body. That is the direction in which your shadow or your texturized fur is going to be drawn. So watch as I take these scratchy fur kind of texturized marks and I'm spreading them from the bottom of the body up and around the spine and through and the bend of the arm and around the paw of the rabbit itself. And also take note on how I'm making sure that that line is moving as if it were muscle itself. Now this lilac is going to be kind of tricky because there are so many tiny details. So what I'm going to try to do here is I am going to try to fill in the shape of shadow, like there's actual sections of shadow or groupings of flowers that create one specific value. And I'm going to try to do that here to the best of my knowledge. Do what you can. This is a really hard area. Later on we will cover this area in more detail, but right now we're literally focusing on texturized line for fur and implied line to create a sense of realism. Later on, we'll focus on the clustering shadows like hair and so on and so forth in another lesson. And that, my friend, is how you can shade a riveting rabbit using pen and ink. Please stay tuned for more tutorials, and until then, I look forward to seeing you in the classroom.